and just being able to kind of conquer something on my own that I didn't think I would be able to do. Sometimes even in the moment, I don't think I can do this. And then you kind of get through it, which I believe can benefit you just really in your daily life.
Today we're going to be discussing getting out on the trail for several days backpacking, and in particular, section hiking the Appalachian Trail. But the tips and insights that our guest provides apply to all section hiking adventures. I can't wait to share it with you, so let's get started. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. I have personally hiked at least a day hike and often backpacked sections of the Appalachian Trail, or the AT, over the last 10 years, I'd say. In fact, I've done so in all but a couple of the 14 states the Appalachian Trail runs through, from Georgia to Maine. The trail itself is about 2,200 miles and takes most folks, if they were doing it all at one time, about 5 to 6 months. But not many of us can or even want to be out in the trail that long. So a great compromise is to section hike the Appalachian Trail. This means simply hiking a chunk of this magnificent trail and doing so in the time that you have available. Until recently, it had been a while since I've been out in the AT, but now that I'm in eastern Tennessee by the mountains and I've joined a fun hiking club, I'm often out in the ATs on Saturdays. And just last month, I went on a backpacking section of the stunning Roan Highlands with my friend Taylor, that cool young man I met at Zion National Park last year, and whom you first heard about in my Utah podcast. On Taylor and I's last night in the Highlands, we met Monica as she came into camp. Monica is currently section hiking much of the AT, and I wanted to get her insights on it. Monica is a filmmaker based out of D.C. and Maryland. She's a woman who loves the outdoors, and in addition to through hiking the John Muir Trail, she's been solo section hiking parts of the Appalachian Trail. Thanks for coming on the program, Monica. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Listen, before we get started, so we have an idea who Monica is, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe how old you are, how you got into backpacking and hiking and all that kind of thing, just so we know who we're talking to today?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Monica. I'm 34 years old. Grew up on the East Coast in Maryland, so right outside of DC. I've always loved hiking and just being outside. I think I get my outdoor enthusiasm definitely from my dad. He loved to go camping and fishing and biking and was always outside. And ironically, we didn't do a ton of outdoor things as a family, but as I got a little older, I did go fishing with him a few times. But I would say my love for the outdoors has definitely been since I was a kid. I would be outside riding my bike all the time. And back in like the mid 90s, as a kid, in the summertime, you just ride your bike outside as far as you can go, right? Until it gets dark and then you come back home, right?
Right. That's how I grew up as well, except for I did not get the whole memo about the outdoors until maybe the last decade. So you're decades ahead of me and all that and getting out there and really enjoying the benefits of the outdoor life.
Yeah. And, as a teenager, once I was able to drive, I would just go on these local trails with my dog and go hiking, and not having any sort of navigation skills except for where I parked the car. And I would just kind of retrace my steps back. But fast forward to around 2017, my friend took me out on my first longer day hike, and it was about 9 miles. We went down to Shenandoah. And after that 9 miles, I was exhausted. My feet hurt. I was not wearing the right shoes, but there was something about it that just kind of kept me coming back. There was something about the endurance of it and the challenge of it that made me want more. And so since then, I eventually got into backpacking and some long distance hiking, which I felt came to me very naturally. And so, yeah, it just kind of took off from there.
Oh, cool. So today, our topic we're going to be talking about is section hiking the Appalachian Trail. And in fact, that's how we met. You were doing a section hike up on the AT in the Roan Highlands. Tell us a little bit about section hiking in particular. Are you trying to do the whole AT or give us the backstory on that?
Yeah, so right now my plan is not to through hike the entire AT, but I didn't really know anything about the AT until probably 4 years ago. And I think being on the East Coast and given the history and the popularity of the Appalachian Trail, it was kind of a natural lure for me. And, with so many thru hikers now on YouTube and on the internet, no matter what section you're on, it kind of feels familiar. And so there's a little bit of a comfort there. I had seen the section where we met on the Roan Highlands. That had looked like a really beautiful section to me. And so that had been something that I had been wanting to do probably in the last year or so. And so I figured, you know what, I'm just going to go out there, solo section hike it on my own and just have a great time. And so, yeah, seeing different sections of the AT, especially down in Tennessee, North Carolina, where we were. And I'm hoping to be able to see some more sections up more north, up in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. So as of now, I'm pretty familiar with the Maryland, Virginia area, and then Tennessee, North Carolina. So I'm definitely hoping to get more sections off my bucket list.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And I'm like you, I don't aspire to do the entire trail, which is approximately 2,200 miles long and takes the average hiker maybe 5 months. I don't want to give up that much of my time to it, but I try to pick the pretty parts like the Roan Highlands, which I'd done before. And so I had wanted to take my friend who had not been up there to make sure that he got a chance to see that.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think it's also been great for a training ground for me to do other hikes that I really want to do out west. And so I think because the AT is certainly more physically challenging when it comes to that endurance, there's a lot of up and down as opposed to some of those West Coast trails like the PCT where it's a lot of gradual climbs. The sections on the AT have definitely helped for me as just kind of as a way to kind of train and really build my endurance up for some trails that I want to definitely do.
So how did you plan this section? So if somebody says, okay, I'm like you guys, I don't want to do the whole thing, but I'd like to dip my toes into it and you did what, a 4-day hike, something like that. Tell us how you come about planning something, what goes into planning it.
Yeah. So the nice thing about the Appalachian Trail is that it's super well established, right? There are towns every 10 to 20 miles or so, and there's a lot of hostels and a lot of people that have volunteered their time to kind of serve the hiking community, and the trail is what you would call trail angels, right? And so you have a lot of people out there that are willing to help other hikers out, whether it's giving rides or shuttles or letting people stay at their homes or give them meals or something like that. So for this particular section, I actually found a guide on somebody's website on this particular section of the Roan Highlands. And so it was super helpful, which is how I heard about the hostel. So I had heard about the Mountain Harbor Bed and Breakfast Hostel, went to their website. They had a great website, lots of information, and it turned out that they had shuttles. And so it was kind of the perfect thing for me because I was driving down there in my own car from Maryland. So they allowed people to park at their parking lot, and they gave shuttle rides to and from wherever you needed to go. And so I scheduled my shuttle from there to the trailhead that I started at, and then essentially just walked back to my car. So it was actually pretty seamless. It's not always that easy, I would say. Some places are a little bit more remote, and so you might need to hopefully have a friend help you out, or just do a little bit more pre-planning ahead of time. But yeah, that's the really nice thing about the AT is that there's so many people that are willing to help you out when you need it. So
Terrific. And there's an excellent guidebook that's called the AT Guide by AWOL. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. That really breaks down the different sections. You can see the elevation gain and loss, how many miles, what kind of amenities there, water, trail towns, etc. So speaking about water, what did you do about water? I mean, it's hot, summertime.
yeah, and it's funny because I can't remember if I said this to you guys at the camp, but the water sources definitely felt a little bit more cumbersome than what I'm typically used to on the Appalachian Trail. I think I was expecting like rushing rivers and just a lot more easier access to water. But for this particular hike, I would fill up on streams. I use a water filter, and I use the Catadine Be-Free water filter, very popular filter. The Sawyer is another popular one. I know Platypus has a filter. So there's so many different water filters out there. I just choose the Catadine because it's worked for me. Yeah, and that's pretty much what I did for water. I would fill up wherever I saw a stream and then just filter my water there to drink and cook. And so I definitely had to make sure to drink plenty of water out there. It was pretty humid, it was pretty hot, and there was a lot of climbing. And so honestly, looking back, I probably could have done a better job staying a little more hydrated, but I survived.
And I will also, my companion podcast, the Adventure Travel Show podcast, I did an episode on water purification systems. I'll also put a link to that in the show notes. So we talked about water. How about food? What do you eat? That's usually the biggest bugaboo for me.
Yeah, and it's so funny. Before I left, as I was packing, I really tried to think, okay, how much food do I actually need? Right? How hungry was I? Because when you're packing, you always think, I'm going to be so hungry, right? And some people are. Some people get that hunger right away and they just go to town on all their food. But I think a lot of people don't get as hungry as they think they do. When you are expending that much energy, it takes a little bit more effort to eat. And so I really tried to pack the right amount of food that I would need for each day. And so I do a couple of things. One thing that I do is I'll pack my snacks that I'll have throughout the day. So that might be trail mix. I get a lot of those single package trail mix from Trader Joe's. You can get them from the store. Granola bars, Lara bars, candy. I had a bag of gummy bears, which I ended up losing, unfortunately, the second day. It was so devastating. And then for dinners, there's a couple ways you can do dinners, right? You can buy those prepackaged dehydrated meals from your local outfitter, REI. Or what I do actually is I will dehydrate my own meals. And so, which has been actually super great. I bought a dehydrator on Amazon for like $40 and started looking up some kind of easier recipes like spaghetti, lasagna, rice and beans, things like that. And yeah, I would just cook it a couple of days before. I'd eat it that night, and then I would dehydrate the rest overnight and then pack it in these Mylar bags, that they can kind of zip up and keep the heat. So that's what I did for my dinners, and I skipped over lunch. Typically for lunch, I'll do like tuna packets, maybe some cheese, crackers. So I think it's always important to kind of be eating a little bit throughout the day just to kind of keep your energy up, make sure you don't bonk or anything like that. Have some sugars on you to eat that. And then in the evening, you want to have a good dinner with good protein, something that'll help your muscles recover.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm like you, when I go backpacking, maybe the first 3 or 4 days, my appetite's about the same, but the next time after that or the next week, I'm ravenous. So if you're only going out for a few days, you want to have enough food, but I think that's really good advice because food is heavy. It's about 1.5 pounds per day, which adds up. I mean, you've got to carry all this on your back.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah. Right. That definitely happens to me. After I get back, of course, your metabolism is all out of whack, right? And so your body thinks, oh, we're going to be doing this 15-mile a day again. Okay, we should preserve, so make sure that you're all good. And so you think that, oh yeah, I just need to start eating more. No. It's okay. You can chill out. So that's definitely something that I tried to be mindful of this time around after I came home. It's like, no, I might be a little bit more hungry than usual, but it's okay. I don't need to start just, binging everything.
And then another thing I wanted to mention when you were talking about dehydrating, I met a guy on the trail once that he had a deal with his hiking partner that he would carry the kitchen and the food if the guy would cook the food. And he said everything was delicious, and he got it out of a book called Lip Smacking Backpacking. So I'll also put a link to that in the show notes as well. You might want to check it out too, since you're such an avid hiker, because he swore that it had the best food. But you can't, when you are backpacking, it's actually a great time to eat all the gummy bears and junk food you don't normally do at home because it's lightweight, fast, a lot of calories. And so it's a good excuse to look like a kid buying the stuff in the grocery store, even if you would normally eat that stuff at home.
Exactly. Yeah. Hiking is the one thing that you can just eat all the junk food and still lose weight. So it's great.
So walk us through a typical day for you. Yeah,
so I will typically get up pretty early in the morning. Usually when you kind of see the first light is when you start getting up, right? I would say my morning routine hasn't changed very much. I think after hiking the John Muir Trail last year, I got a pretty good routine going as far as being efficient. And one thing I will say is everybody has their own way of camping and backpacking. Some people like to take a little bit more time at camp. Some people like to take less time. I would say I fall a little bit in the middle. There are some mornings where I get up and I kind of want to get going and start walking. I might eat my breakfast maybe a mile or two into my walk, or sometimes I might make some coffee in the morning when I'm still at camp, right? So it just kind of depends on how I'm feeling. But I think this last hike, there was one morning where I did get up, pack up right away. I started walking, and then I stopped about a mile in to make some coffee, eat a little breakfast, and kind of chilled there for a little bit. And then there was another day where I got up in the morning, made some coffee, hung out, talked to some people, and took a little bit more time at camp. And so it just kind of depends on how I'm feeling for that day. But when I'm hiking throughout the day, I will typically take a break maybe every 4 miles or so. So every couple of hours. I'm not a super fast hiker. And I think that's one thing to point out. Sometimes, especially if you're hiking with other people, sometimes there can feel almost like a pressure to kind of keep up with the next person or whatever. But I'm not much of a fast hiker. I'm kind of a 2.5 mile an hour pace kind of person. And so I try to take my time while I'm out there during the day and take a break every couple of hours or when I just feel tired. And then I will hike the amount of miles that I need to do for the day. And once I get to camp, I will set up all of my tent and my sleeping stuff and then make my dinner after that. And if there's people at the camp, I'll talk with them, hang out with them for a little bit, and then pretty much just go to bed. So kind of going back to my style of backpacking is very much on the trail. I don't spend as much time at camp as some others do. So some people might get to camp in the afternoon, maybe around 3 or 4 o'clock. I like to hike a little bit more into the evening and then really just use that time at camp to kind of eat and go to sleep.
Yeah, I know she came in, it was like 7 or 8 o'clock. I was like, boy, I'd have been in camp at least 3 hours. About 4 o'clock, I start looking for shelter. And they do have shelters about like 8 to 10 miles apart, but there's also lots of places that you can camp in between particularly if you want to be by yourself. So you want to talk a little bit about that and how hard it is to find a place to camp?
Yeah, another really nice thing I'll say about the AT is that you have, like you said, you have those shelters every 10 to 12 miles. And so if you don't want to stealth camp necessarily, you can always camp at the shelter. And that's typically what I'll do. Unless my plans change. I did a section hike down in Roanoke earlier this year, and I think I hiked about 12 miles on the first day, and I started a little later than I wanted to just because I had to work in the morning. And so by the time I had climbed up to the pass that I was going to, it was already starting to get dark, and there were some tent sites there, and so I decided to just set up right there, and so I would have rather had camped at the shelter because I'll say a lot of the shelters have the bear boxes and you kind of have a little bit more amenities, quote unquote. But yeah, sometimes it just kind of depends on where I'm at along the trail, but I will typically try and camp at the shelters if I can along the AT. So if I'm not on the AT, that's a different story, but.
Right, and the shelters do give you some socialization because generally speaking, particularly in season, people are going to be there. But now you traveled solo. Let's talk a little bit about what it's like to backpack solo, some of the pros and cons.
Yeah, so far I have really enjoyed traveling solo. Some of the pros, you meet a lot of different people. You meet different people from all walks of life, right? I think the trail kind of humanizes everyone in a way to where you can meet someone one day and then, you're kind of having burgers with them maybe the next day or something like that. I think the nice thing about going solo is that you can kind of go your own pace, right? You can kind of hike your own hike, essentially, as they say. You can kind of do what you want to do. Yeah, it's definitely helped my confidence in the outdoors, but I think it also has its drawbacks, right? So obviously, hiking solo is more risky, right? So in the case that I'm by myself, I'm a little bit more vigilant in keeping up with my people at home. And I would say another drawback to going alone is something that pertains to the season that I'm in right now and kind of this back and forth of wanting to be settled in a community, but also wanting to go out and explore. And as nice as it is going out on my own and exploring some of these new places, it does sometimes take me away from investing in the community or the people that I have here at home, right? And so I think that's something that I'm trying to figure out a balance. But going out solo has just really been beneficial to me. And of course, my mental health and just being able to kind of conquer something on my own that I didn't think I would be able to do. Sometimes even in the moment, I don't think I can do this. And then you kind of get through it, which I believe can benefit you just really in your daily life. And so I think going in groups, I would always encourage people to hike in groups. It's certainly the safest way. And if everyone is on the same page and communicates expectations beforehand, you can make some great memories, right? I mean, I frequently think about the John Muir Trail and the groups of people that I got to hike with last year. And I think about that all the time, right? So I think when you do go in groups, you are able to make those lasting memories. Whereas if you're going solo, sometimes it's really just a time to be fully present where you are, right? Which I think is great. So plus and minuses to both for sure.
Right. And sometimes you can do a combination. You can be with people like when I went with Jane and Jerry, I hiked faster. So I was normally quite a bit ahead. So I was kind of getting the feel of being solo, but we all met at the same place for lunch. We stayed at the same place at night for dinner. So you can kind of do a hybrid if you have a hiking partner that is at a different pace than you.
Yeah, definitely. That's how we did it a lot on the JMT last year. There were 4 of us hiking together, but we were hiking all day, every day for 19 days straight. And so there were plenty of times where I would be by myself or we would kind of split up, but we would always meet up at the end of the day. So it was a great compromise there.
Yeah, so somebody's looking for you if you don't show up, say you get hurt, or one thing, they're gonna say, oh, Monica's a girl. Isn't that scary? What, is she afraid? Is she afraid of the boogeyman hurting her? I mean, is that something? I've never felt fear there, but I certainly can understand where it comes from. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's probably the concern that I hear about most from people. And the reality is not everyone is an angel out there, right? Not everyone is great. And I think that's where you really have to just kind of use wisdom, use discernment, and just be alert. If you see somebody on the trail that is in the backcountry that doesn't have any hiking gear or doesn't look like they're section hiking or through hiking, that could be a red flag, right? But in general, I have had a positive experience. I haven't been doing this forever, but so far, I have not had any issues as far as safety concerns. I guess I would say the closest thing that could have been a potential danger was I was getting ready to do a training hike out on the AT on the Maryland side. And I pulled up to the trailhead and somebody told me, oh, hey, just be careful. There's a man at the shelter and he might be homeless. We're not really sure, but just be careful with him there. And I decided I don't need to go down there. I didn't have any backup plans. And so I just ended up bailing altogether, right? So I didn't need to put myself in a potential dangerous situation. It probably would have been fine. But again, just using wisdom when I can. If I can avoid something when I can, then I'm going to. And then, of course, checking in with your people at home. I always tell at least 2 people where I am, where I'm going. When I plan to be back, I'll check in when I get to camp. So yeah, for me, it's just a matter of taking those safety precautions to mitigate those risks.
Excellent advice. And I have my own little rule too, that I worry not so much about fellow through hikers or backpackers, but townies, so I do not camp, say within a mile of a road or something like that. And your maps will tell you that. Anywhere, if somebody could carry a case of beer where they might do something stupid, I just try to stay outside of that perimeter.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
What about animals? People are like, isn't the bear going to eat you? We talk about the critters.
Yeah, so I would say people and animals, right, are the number one concern. Probably animals are probably people's number one concern, right? Bears and, and things like that. Even though a bear is probably the animal that you're least likely going to see. Some people will go hike the first time and they'll see a bear 10 minutes into their hike. My friend Justin, on the other hand, he's been on the AT since February. He saw his first bear 4 months in. So I guess it all depends on your luck, right? But I mean, same kind of thing. It's so funny because I have yet to see a bear on trail. I have not seen one yet. I haven't seen any scary animals yet. Part of me just kind of wants to have the bear encounter just to get it over with. If I'm going to see a bear, just have it happen so I can do all the right things and survive it. But I still have yet to see a bear, ironically. Even doing the entire JMT and all the sections of the AT that I've done, I have not seen a bear yet. But it's the same kind of thing, right? You do what you can to mitigate those risks, right? And it kind of goes back to hiking in groups. If you're with at least one other person, you're probably going to be talking, you're going to be making a little bit more noise. So usually that's going to naturally scare off any bears, right? As far as the smaller critters, like mice, those are the ones you really have to worry about, mice and ticks and things like that. Best way to kind of handle that is to really store your food properly. I keep my food in the OP sack bags. So they're like these odorless plastic bags that you can buy on Amazon for like $10, I think. Those can help keep the smell away from critters or any animals that you don't want to get to your food. Doing small things to kind of mitigate those risks, even though it doesn't completely eliminate it, but also knowing how to handle it if something does occur.
Right. Good procedure is to hang your food away from where you're camping. So if a bear does come into camp and he's going after the food, he's not anywhere near you. And frankly, most places on the AT, bears are hunted. So the bear hears you, he's going to run.
Right, right. Most of these bears out here don't want anything to do with you. And it helps to camp at the shelters where there are more people. Sometimes at some of these established campsites, right, you have people that don't necessarily know how to store their food properly. So sometimes there can be frequent bears there. But for me, I kind of look at it as more people, more power. And so I'd rather camp where there are more people that are going to be camping there rather than camping alone somewhere else where a potential threat might occur.
So what are the kinds of things that you see on the trail? What's the appeal aesthetically?
Oh, it's kind of cool to see the different ecosystems change, right? Even starting at low elevation, right, on the ground, and then kind of climbing a bit higher, particularly in the South, like Southern Virginia, and then around the Roan Highlands down in Tennessee, North Carolina. It's a lot more sandy when you get a little bit higher in elevation. And the trees were really beautiful. The trees were just like these big brown trunks and very tall pine trees, which is really cool. Something you don't see as much up this way in Virginia or Maryland. So that was really appealing to me. And of course, the beautiful views, the beautiful hills, and just the gorgeous mountain ranges that you can kind of just see far off into the distance. Really, really beautiful. And so it's been cool to kind of see those different sections of the AT, that it does have some variety to it, because I think sometimes it can feel a little bit monotonous, right? The kind of the tree tunnel, right? But there are some really beautiful sections, especially like in Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire. As you get closer to Canada, you start seeing some of those big mountain ranges, which is really cool.
So we actually met on a bald, which is that is one reason I wanted to return to this area. So they're not quite sure what started originally, although they're mowing them now, but the tops of these mountains are just grassy fields with no trees. So you get this 360 view that you feel like you're Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music. And it's just spectacular just being up in the Blue Ridge Mountains and just seeing mountains as far as the eye can see. It's really something. You feel like you're on top of the world.
Yeah, I love it. And I have really come to appreciate just the mountains and the Appalachians out here on the East Coast. I think hiking out, doing the JMT and hiking a lot out west, so you have the high elevations, right? You kind of have the big snow-capped mountains, but there is something that is really special and serene about the Appalachian Trail. I love the greenery. I love the green trees. I love just the contrast and the colors of the dirt and all the rivers and the streams and kind of like just endless streams you have. And so, yeah, I've really come to appreciate just the whole AT. And I really enjoy hiking out this way. As much as I do love the big mountains out west, I definitely have an appreciation for the East Coast trails.
Yeah, I've traveled and hiked a whole bunch of different kinds of mountains, and this Southeast Appalachian, I believe, are my favorite mountains I've seen so far in the world. Do you have any favorite stories that you like to share?
Last year, hiking the John Muir Trail, I think it's so funny because as we were planning on going out there, our number one concern was forest fires, right? We were kind of coming up with backup plans. We said, okay, maybe we'll go to the Tahoe Rim Trail if the fires are too bad and things like that. So we were all concerned about forest fires, which is a great concern. But during our first week out there, our main concern became thunderstorms, right? And so those kind of afternoon thunderstorms that hit when you're at 10,000 feet is not great, not ideal. So we were climbing one of the passes. It was about 11,000 feet or so. We came up to the pass and we start seeing the clouds roll in. And so we said, okay, let's get back down. We got to go back down. And so we're all kind of shuffling back down. And of course it starts to rain and we all end up down far enough to where we're in a safe location, but also still a little sketchy. at the same time. And we're all just kind of standing there as it starts to just pour rain. It starts hailing on us, and we all throw our trekking poles because we're all afraid we're going to get electrocuted. And we stood there for probably a solid hour until we all started shivering and kind of got borderline hypothermic. It was a whole thing. And I think that was like an awakening for us that, oh yeah, these mountains, they don't care who you are. They will just kill you if you're not careful enough. And so that was certainly something to remember. And yeah, it was a pretty big storm because I remember people were talking about that one storm for days and days on end. But that was certainly memorable, just being caught in that thunderstorm, borderline hypothermic, and also having to hike through it and realize that there was nowhere we could go at the time, right? And so nowadays, it's kind of funny because now when I go on a day hike or even a section hike and it starts to rain or something like that, I don't worry as much because, especially when you're on a day hike, I'm like, well, you know what? I'll be at the car in 2 hours. So it's all good. But you get a little bit more of appreciation once you've been in a situation that you can't just get out of right away.
Right. And lightning, that's my biggest fear out there. It's more than the boogeyman, more than bears or snakes or whatever. That's the one. And actually I did a show on that too on my companion podcast. I'll put a link on that. But you just, in that situation, you do not want to be on the top. You've got to get down and you got to get away from trees as best you can.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I learned. And it's funny because I probably should have been more concerned at the time. I probably wasn't concerned enough. I knew that we shouldn't be on an exposed ridge during a storm, but I wasn't as fearful as some other people were. And I probably should have been more concerned than I was.
Do you have any favorite sections of the Appalachian Trail that you would recommend?
Good. Yeah, I think honestly, the Roan Highlands, what we just came from, is probably one of my favorite sections for sure. It was just beautiful. And the balds, like you said, you feel like you're in Sound of Music when you're up there. And you don't have to hike as many miles as I did. I did about 50 miles total, but most people hike about the 16-mile section, which is where you get some of those best views from Carver's Gap up to 19E. So I would definitely recommend doing that section. You can do it in one night, you could do it in one day, you could do it in 2 days, whatever works for you. But I would say my other favorite section is down in Roanoke. That's where you get the Triple Crown. So they call it the Triple Crown of Virginia. So you get McAfee Knob, Tinker Cliffs, and Dragon's Tooth. And so those are 3 really cool summits. McAfee Knob has that famous rock that kind of sticks out when everyone takes a picture up on top there. And Tinker Cliffs has a beautiful sunset. And it's great because it's a loop. So you can do a section of the AT, and then there's another trail that connects, and you can turn it into a loop. So total, it's about 35 miles or so. So a lot of people go there on weekends to do that section. And so that's become one of my favorite sections. One, because it's closer to town. So for me as a solo hiker, I kind of like knowing that I have multiple bailout points, right? And so knowing that if I need to get off trail for whatever reason, it's relatively easy. I also like it because you have the shelters along the AT, which have the bear boxes there. So that's nice. Yeah, and it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful hike. So I would say the Roan Highlands and the Triple Crown of Virginia. Those are probably my 2 favorite sections.
And where do you park to do the Triple Crown?
Well, it's nice because it's a loop, so there's multiple places you can park. I think there's different ways people say it. But I will typically park at the McAfee Knob parking lot. And so sometimes the parking lot can get a little crowded on the weekends because you have a lot of day hikers that do McAfee Knob in one day. They kind of go up and then come back. So the parking lot can get a little bit crowded, but if you go at the right time, you can get a space and just leave your car there for the weekend. But Dragon's Tooth also has a parking lot. The Tinker Cliffs trailhead also has a lot. And so it just kind of depends on where you want to start.
Cool. So I want you to think back in time and look at your experiences and your blunders and the things that you've learned. What advice would you give somebody that was thinking, hey, I'd like to try this for the first time?
I will say, when it comes to planning a backpacking trip, I would say be as realistic as you can, right? And so What I mean by that is we kind of talked about it before about like planning for food, right? How hungry am I actually going to be? Do I really need 7 dinners for 2 nights, right? Or how many days do I need to hike this trail? How in shape am I to hike this trail, right? So I would say be as realistic as you can and do what works for you. They say hike your own hike for a reason. And even though it's become kind of a cliche term, I think it's true, right? You want to hike the miles that work for you. If you want to camp, if you want to be at camp longer, be at camp longer. If you want to go with a group, you should definitely go with a group. The other thing I'll say is it's a lot easier to plan a very grandiose trip in the comfort of your air-conditioned room, right? until you get out there and you get in a thunderstorm or something happens. And so you always want to be ready just to change your plans, or you just want to be flexible. I would say more on a philosophical level, don't let societal norms hold you back, right? And so I think that's something that I'm learning right now. You know, I'm 34, I'm kind of established in my career, comfortable lifestyle. And so sometimes I think those things can hold me back from what I really want to do, right? And so I've thought about, oh, maybe I will go move to this different city and just explore the trails in this city or that city. And yeah, I think if that's something that you want to do, don't let societal norms hold you back. I think that's one great thing about the internet is that we see that there's so many people that live differently, right? There's so many ways to live and explore the world beyond our own bubble. Another thing is gather as much resources as you can. Do your research. That's one of the things that really goes into, for me, choosing the trail that I'm going to do is how much information can I gather from a particular trail, right? If I can't gather a lot of information on it and it's kind of off the beaten path, I'm probably not going to do it. I'm not much of a off the beaten path kind of person. I'm very much okay, is there a trail here? Is it well marked? Is the town relatively close? Is it pretty well established? And that's pretty much what I look for when I'm looking at different trails to do, is how much information can I gather about this particular hike. So definitely do your research, watch videos. There's so many resources out there. So read the books, watch the videos, surf online, all that good stuff.
Definitely. And I do also, when I keep referring back to the Adventure Travel Show podcast, that's my sister podcast that has all the skills and how-tos really geared a lot towards hiking. There's a lot in there about backpacking, what to pack, what not to pack, all those kinds of things. So I refer you to go look through that website and the podcast, and you can pick up all sorts of tips that will kind of flesh out some of the things Monica and I have been talking about today. Right. And like you mentioned earlier, the AT is so well marked, so well planned out that if you want to dip your toes into section hiking, I can't think of a better trail to do it on.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And that's why I keep going back to it, because it's so well established. I think there's just a comfort there and there's a familiarity there, and you kind of know what to expect when you get on sometimes it almost feels a little strange sometimes if I'm on the AT and then if I have to go, if I'm doing a loop, like in Roanoke, for example, if I'm doing a loop, half of it is on the AT and then the other half is on a different trail. So it almost feels a little strange to kind of make a left turn and then go on a different trail and then you're off the AT, because you're kind of losing a little bit of that familiarity there. But doing AT sections is kind of the perfect place if you're wanting to get some experience backpacking, if you're wanting to train for maybe a harder hike, if you're wanting to meet some good people on the trail. Yeah, it kind of provides all those things for you.
Very cool. And Monica did a fantastic video that I've already embedded on the website for this episode. Monica's a filmmaker, so you know it's going to be good. So make sure that you check out her YouTube channel and subscribe, and you can get an idea of this section that she and I were doing when we met just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm super glad I got to do it. I definitely want to go back. I'll probably go back and do just the bald section like you were speaking about before, because it was just so beautiful.
It is. In fact, up there on the Little Hump Mountain, I found where I want to camp, because there's, oddly enough, a few trees and this one smaller bald with this spectacular view. I was like, I'm going to just stick out there, bring a good book, and just hike up there one day and spend the weekend just chilling and enjoying, and then hike back down to my car.
Yeah, yeah. And I met a girl when I was up on Hump Mountain, actually. And it was kind of cool. We got to talking and we just had a little lunch together. And she hiked the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail, I think back in 2013, 2015. So way back, I mean, not super long ago, but long enough before I think the through hiking on the internet became really, really popular, right? So she was like an OG to me, and she was telling me a little bit about her experience. And so, yeah, it's just really cool. You meet all sorts of people out on the trail, people from different walks of life. And yeah, like I said, it just kind of humanizes everybody in a way that just allows you to kind of be fully present where you are and with other people.
I know that me section hiking, a lot of my listeners will remember me. I referred back to it all the time because that 2-week section I did on the AT totally changed my life. It changed my perspective on how much stuff do I need at home? Because you learn that everything you need fits in your back, and it tilts you in a better way. I think I really, really, really like backpacking for that reason.
Yeah, exactly. That was my experience on the JMT. You kind of learn efficiency. You just kind of learn what you can get away with, essentially. And so that's allowed me to kind of keep my pack relatively light and kind of switch things up a little bit. It's like, oh, okay, I don't really need this, or do I actually need this?
So when you finish one of these adventures in one of these sections, how do you feel? I know you're tired, but how do you feel mentally?
I almost feel like I'm kind of recentering myself, right? When I'm out there, it's a nice time for me to just clear my head and not really think of anything that I have to do, that I should have done, that I might have to do in the future. And coming back, it really allows me to just kind of be in that space, at least for a few days, and approach things from more of a pure level, right? I feel a little bit more calm as I approach new challenges, if that makes sense. I feel like my anxiety levels are down. I feel like my stress levels are down when I come back. Now, physically, I might want to take a nap each day for the next 3 days. But mentally, I feel like I'm just a little bit more centered and a little bit more back to myself, if that makes sense. It's always a good thing necessarily to use it as a way of escape all the time, but it's kind of like taking that challenge that you're doing, taking that endurance and using that in your daily life, right? So when you get back home and say you have to face something that's challenging or you have to have a tough conversation, you can have that tough conversation knowing that you just climbed up this pass or you just faced this really challenging time on the trail, or you got through a thunderstorm and survived it, knowing that you kind of got through some of those physical and mental challenges on the trail. I think when you face those things in your life, I think you can always refer back to that and say like, okay, yeah, I can do this. If I can get through that, I can definitely get through this.
Right. And I think also, like, if I go day hiking, my mind will still wander about all sorts of different things. The little hamster cage goes around and around. But when I'm backpacking, you are, or at least I am, thinking about, though there's a dragonfly, and I'm not thinking about my problems. I'm not thinking about home, not thinking about any of that stuff, but just being in the woods and putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, definitely.
I definitely feel proud of myself when I get back. I was like, I feel like a badass, most people can't do it, but anybody who trains for it can do it. So, I mean, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Can you tell us how you train or how you prepare physically for these adventures?
Yeah, so there are different ways you can train, right? Of course, the number one thing would probably be to hike as much as you can, right? And so I try to hike as much as I can on the weekends. Another thing that I do that I personally enjoy, I actually like doing the high intensity workouts. It's not for everybody, but for me, it kind of helps get that energy out, kind of, again, going through that physical challenge and sort of that endurance challenge kind of thing. So I will typically go to the gym and do those high intensity workouts. But another thing you can do is you can get some weights at home. You can order them, off of Amazon or whatever, and you can do your own workouts at home. And what I would actually suggest is not just training for cardio and endurance, but also training for strength, right? So doing squats, doing kettlebell swings, really training your muscles and your calves to be strong, to prevent injury. Because at the end of the day, you don't necessarily have to be the fastest hiker, but you don't want to get hurt, right? You want to prevent those injuries. And so a lot of times I think people will focus more on the endurance and the cardio, but forget about the actual strength training and then potentially end up hurting themselves or getting a stress fracture on trail or maybe hurting their knees. And so my suggestion would definitely be to train just as much for strength, do a lot of strength training as much as you do a cardio. And so that would be my word of advice for training. And so what I try to do when I'm doing the HIIT workouts is if I'm lifting, I'll try to lift a little bit heavier than I might be a little more comfortable with. And I'll try to like up the weight just a little bit more just to kind of get a little bit more resistance in that training in.
Excellent advice.
Thank you. Thank you.
I sure appreciate you coming on the program, Monica. Where to next?
Yeah, so currently I am planning on doing the Colorado Maroon Bells, the 4-pass loop. So I'm hoping to do that later this summer, probably in August. I would love to do the Tahoe Rim Trail. I started planning it earlier this summer, but another thing that I'm actually working on is I'm working on a film documentary. This is just a quick plug, working on a film documentary called Outer Soul, and it's actually about Black hikers. And so, being Black myself, there's not a ton of us out there. And so when I started backpacking more, I said, man, I would really love to just kind of make a documentary that kind of represents our experience out in the outdoors and talks about our relationship with the outdoors. And so it follows my friend Justin, who's on the AT right now. He's been out there since February. And so he should be finishing up his through hike probably in August or so. So I got some things planned, working on the film, doing section hikes. Hopefully I can do the Tahoe Rim Trail next year after the film and everything is finished, but that's what's going on.
Well, yeah, because that reminds me, when I met you, it was your birthday, and that other man, I don't remember his name, but he was looking for you. And when we said we hadn't seen a through hiker, then later he said, well, it's a Black girl, and you're the only Black woman we saw the whole day. So when he came up, I said, there's a man looking for you. And that's kind of weird, but that is the state of things, that there's just you just don't see a lot of Black people out on the trail. And I'm glad you're doing the documentary so people's, I don't know. You tell me, what do we need to do so that they get to see the joy that you and I get out of the trail?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I am making these videos for my YouTube channel, just to send them to friends and really inspire people. There are so many layers to it, and I'm hoping that I can cover the basis in the film, but I'll talk a little bit about some of the systemic reasons behind why the trails are not as diverse. Part of it is just accessibility, right? Part of it is from 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and things like that. And so I'll cover some of that in the film, but really I just want to show people that we are out here and we're not afraid to be out here, right? We are comfortable in the outdoors, we love the outdoors, and we want to see more people that look like us in the outdoors and enjoying ourselves without any hesitation. And we want it to be a place of freedom for us. And so I'm hoping to show that in the film and inspire people to do that. And so, yeah, I'm excited for it to come out. It's been a fun process. It's been a challenging process. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens with it.
Yeah, well, when it's ready, let us know. We'll link to wherever we need to so that people can find it. But even just saying that reminds me. So I mentioned earlier, I didn't do any of this stuff until about 10 years ago because I wasn't exposed to it. If you're not exposed to it, you don't even know it's there. It's like something other people do, but not something people like me do. And so maybe it's something along those same lines as well. Who knows? Hopefully you'll dig down a little deeper and come up with some answers and help people feel more comfortable getting out there.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of it is accessibility and things like that. And like I said, there's so many layers, but hopefully films like this, and there's also so many Black hiking groups out there that are starting to do different hikes and go on different trips and things like that. So I think the population's growing for sure. And so I'm excited about it.
Thank you again, Monica, for coming on the show. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you. Had a blast.
I hope Monica has inspired you to consider section hiking the AT or some other grand trail that you've had your eyes on. I want to reiterate that my companion podcast, The Adventure Travel Show, and its website feature all the how-tos of adventure travel. It's a tremendous resource to help you gain the skills and confidence to tackle amazing adventures like section hiking. There are links on the show notes, or you can go directly to adventuretravelshowpodcast.com. If you're enjoying the show, I would appreciate you sharing it with your adventurous friends and family. Word of mouth is the #1 way folks find new podcasts. And if I can ever help in any way, you can always reach me at kit@activetraveladventures.com or just hit the contact button on the activetraveladventures.com website. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on!